Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, and all you good people. I've received 10 questions from some young students. I imagine the age is between 17 and 15 and up to 17. And I'm going to attempt to answer them by way of a CD. The questions is pertaining to my military experience. The first question is, why did I join the Army? Well, good question. Well, I joined the Army I really deep down, I joined the Army for the adventures. I wanted to travel and see the world and all that good stuff, so I figured the Army would be the best way, or the only way, the only chance I would have of doing it. So that was my reason. The reason I gave my mother, who was a single parent at the time with there were 7 of us all together, and me being the eldest one, my reason to her was I'll be able to help her with my brothers and sisters financially, because she was we were going through a pretty hard time. Well, we kids, we didn't know, we knew we was eating everything, but by me being the eldest, I remember seeing my mother cry about certain things that she had to deal with. Anyway, that's another story. I won't get into that. So anyway, I convinced her. She signed on my 17th birthday, which was on March the 27th, 1950. She finally signed, gave her consent. And on April the 6th of 1950, I was being sworn in. I was sent to I was sent to Fort Riley, Kansas, Camp Stoneman, I believe. Fort Riley, Kansas, yeah. And took my basic training. By the time I finished basic training, I was assigned for further training there in a place called Fort Belvoir, Virginia. That was an engineering school. Demolition and booby trap, I believe it was called. And I figured by going into such a field, I'll be able you get hazardous duty pay, which would have been actually $50 per month. Fortunately, or unfortunately, or whatever the case was, it was fortunately in my case, the war in Korea started, which was July of 1950. So I decided to go there. It wasn't called a war, it was called a police action at that time. So in fact, about 2/3 of that school battalion dropped out, and we all volunteered for Korea. Police action. Our biggest threat was it would end before we got there, because it was only we were told it was only a police action. I even refused. I had 8-day furlough. I refused to take that because I didn't want to miss the boat. I didn't want to miss out on anything. So actually, I volunteered to go my duties in Korea. December the 4th of 1950, I was in Korea, a little seaport called Incheon. To give you a better understanding of it, it was the Chinese communists had just entered the war, and the United Nations, all United Nation troops was in a full retreat. My first memories of Incheon was nothing but smoke-filled skies and chimneys and bombed-out buildings. And dead bodies the Marines had gone through, and anyway, it was a very hard time. It was something that it's very difficult to even imagine, even for me to recall some of the tragedies that I witnessed as a 17-year-old kid. So that's how I happened to get there. The other question I see here is, why did I write the book? Speaking of this book here, which is called What's the Commie Ever Done to Black People? The title, I wrote it under the title Black Warriors in Korea. But once it got to the publishers and they reviewed it, they decided that this was a better title. It would be more catching and to the point. And I agreed with them. I guess one reason I agreed was my anxiety. I wanted my book published. And not so much for the money part. The main reason really was to get the story out there, to try to bring to some reality the realization of what war really is. It's nothing like I assumed it to be, or I had been taught to believe. Wars, war would be like a war movie. It's nothing like that. It's one of the worst things that can happen to any human being, a war, and especially a civilian. It's something that it was so horrible, really, that it took me about 30 years, actually 33 years, before I even talked about any of my experience. And mind you, everything is not in this book, because there are some things that, I just didn't feel like I should talk about or write about. That's me at 17. On my 18th birthday, I had been on the front line 4 months with 5 more to go as a rifleman, combat infantryman. I had aged probably about 10 years in that 4 months. I'll cut right here because I see I've reached the 5-minute mark, and I want to try to keep this interview under 5 minutes per segment. So this is the first 5 minutes. Actually, it's 7 minutes. I'm going to stop it now.